All
Okay.
right. The first thing I wanted to see if anybody wanted to comment on was just maybe a little past, present, future mapping on this. Like, does this whole idea of a subcircle, is that feeling pretty organic? Like it's a natural evolution, or are we building some superstructure onto this? And also, is there like this? I haven't been around as long as any of you, but it seemed like there was a lot of noise around the CA process in general in Fund 7. And I was curious if that's how it seemed to you too. Like, was there actually a credibility hit to the CA process?
Okay, before we go any further, let's take a step back. And when you say this, can we get it from Nadia or someone who says, what is it when we say this? Because when I wrote those ideas for subcircle, that was like a month ago, and a lot has happened since that, and I don't even know what's happening now.
Yeah. So maybe I can give you a little bit of a frame. So Jeremy just reached out and said, you know, we have a lot put together on this subcircle. The documents got circulated that each of the people on this call have contributed to, and really sort of made a stance that the subcircle development is important, and that we need something like this for the purposes that you know, are in those documents, which is kind of what we're going to talk about here. So Jeremy reached out and has just been putting together some ideas for helping to move it forward. And what our hope is for this conversation is that we get sort of on the same page together as far as the purpose and the vision for letting a subcircle emerge and for cultivating that. And that then we take this conversation, once we have sort of a core understanding, we take it more broadly to the community so that we can really expand and diversify the group thinking about it, and also start to maybe put it into practice for the things that are coming up towards Fund 8 that the CAs need to determine. So I think maybe Jeremy's question there is to say, there has been time passed since we originated talking about it, and what is everyone's feeling on maybe just a refresher on the state of the need for it, and anything that would have been added to the conversation since that time. Is that helpful, Jeremy?
Yeah, that's totally fair.
Okay. And then from this conversation, and I'm just going to play a role of facilitating here and just sort of deepening questions and making sure we unpack stuff. So that is my role, so that each of you can contribute to it, to the discussion, who have really formulated the idea and the process and the opportunities. And so that will be pretty much my role here, so that we can make sure we really flush things out and think about things thoroughly. Is that helpful, Tom? Is it to your question?
Yeah. Can we hear from others also? Like, what are the initial thoughts about subcircle?
Yeah, I mean, this idea of a subcircle is now, I think about a month or even a bit longer than that. Tommy, I'm not sure if you proposed it, or if you didn't propose it, someone else will propose it or would have proposed it.
Danny was talking about it.
Danny, okay.
And I asked him, is there a plan for this? And he said, anyone can plan it. So I was like, okay, let's do it.
So this is the, I think, a common problem, thread, challenge, whatever, is like anyone can come up with an idea. The problem is when it comes to implementation, the natural questions emerge, like who is going to do it, who's going to put in the time, who's going to put in the effort, who's going to make the decisions, right? That's the most difficult thing, right? Now there's 5 of us in the conversation. Okay, we're not making any decisions, but we're just talking, and makes no sense to have a Zoom call with like 300 people. Just nothing would be, achieved. I definitely think there is a need for a subcircle. Why? Well, I would see the reason for the subcircle to exist is for, first of all, maybe for Nadia to have a place to hear the voices, to kind of efficiently communicate that in the main catalyst circle, let's say. But we have to structure communication somehow, because Telegram is overwhelming, to be polite. Discord, same. I don't even know where else. Probably Reddit, Twitter, whatever. People are talking everywhere now, and that's fair. And we have to find ways how we hear all of them, and to kind of filter out these ideas. And this is a difficult thing, right? So a subcircle, I would say, would be a meeting where at any point, I would say 10 to 20 people, just off the top of my head, can come in and participate with their own ideas. And these ideas kind of have to be voted or generally accepted through different mechanisms. Doesn't have to be something highly fancy in the beginning. But then when we have, let's say, 100, 200, 300 people, supporting the idea at some point, then we can push it forward, right? And relying on Danny or on IOG, I think, is not a good move, because, hey, we want to be decentralized. We want to step away from, having, Daddy IOG doing things. The least that we can do is kind of propose and push our own ideas into realization. Now, me being more operationally focused, I don't have a single quick solution on how to do that. The most difficult part is we need to ensure that everyone's voice is heard, right? That's the difficult part, because to have everyone's voice heard, people need to be willing to say what's on their mind, what there is to give their opinion. And those opinions kind of need to be analyzed, thought about, and then put into action, right? So that can be our first step. But what I see as a key problem is when we have like this, like subcircle, right? Okay, cool. Who forms it? Who tracks the ideas? Who validates it? How do we make a decision? That's the most difficult part, right? So I don't know if that was helpful, but that's kind of my opinion.
Yeah, I have some ideas of solutions, but I first want to hear from Jeremy. And is it Simon or Simon?
Well, depends on where you are from. I'm fine with either one. Simon is in Swedish. Simon is the English.
And you are Swedish, so it's Simon then.
Yeah, well, I'm used to Simon at this point, so yeah. I mean, okay, I'll just take on from there. My initial reaction was to have just someone keeping track on, say, Reddit, someone keeping track of Discord, and then like, I don't know, 2 people on the Telegram, and then so that Nadia has kind of people that she can rely on providing some kind of digested summary of what's been going on. Very practical. Another thought that I got just from what Philip said was, well, I think there's a risk of, I guess, creating barriers, or at least the perception of this being some kind of, I don't know, elite group or whatever, special selected group. We don't want that. So I'm just trying to think of how do we make sure this is, I guess, accessible in one way, or at least transparent if there's some kind of selection into a subcircle. So these are just my only thoughts, really. I'm not entirely sure why what the purpose of the subcircle really is, even after reading or like giving some input. But isn't there a Google Docs that someone made? And there was a form. I remember filling in a form. What happened with that, like stuff?
Yeah, I'll send you the subcircle. I'll put the subcircle root doc in the chat here, and the survey summaries. Really, the summary is encapsulated in here, or the survey is encapsulated in here, and the results of it. And I think that those are collected. And Tommy, you ran that, so you should speak to it, but collected in order that we really get a sense of contributing to the community's insight to the creation of the purpose and the move and the ensuring that we're moving forward with something that is collectively needed, and to understand what drives that need.
Yeah,
guess-
I can.
Oh yeah,
Excuse me.
just to finish off, I just realized that one of the key things that the subcircle could be doing is the Project Catalyst improvement proposals being kind of the, I mean, the ones who are pushing forward a proposal, like really improving on it. The idea might originate from the community, but we or whoever ends up being on the circle are the ones who are perhaps writing it out, spelling it out, actively asking for feedback, and like just yeah, just making things move forward. So that could be, so you have both the kind of sensor array for Nadia, but also this just very concrete moving Project Catalyst improvement proposals forward. So that could be like two things that are quite clear, at least.
Yeah, I can speak to the survey a bit. There was really some key points to take from it, and like the absolute number one point to take from it for the community responding to it was that connection. They said friendship and relationships were the value for being in Catalyst, and so that tells you whatever you do, you can't step on that. And when they say friendship and relationships, they're talking about connection, and they say friendship because they mean a meaningful connection. That's how I take it. That's how they're defining these things. It means they're deepening the connections. It's not about the number of them. I mean, as Tommy said, you get enough connections and it gets pretty overwhelming pretty fast. So it's not about some critical mass of connection. It's about really getting deep, meaningful connections there. And then you can kind of divide everything else they talked about into two groups. And in the first group, you've got your opportunities. Like this is what I would call the self-interest groups. They're saying they want to learn. They want to see educational materials. They want organization and prioritization. And this is speaking to Simone and the CIPs, because we all see the iterative Dropbox filling up, but we don't see it emptying out. And then collaboration and growth. So these are the things they're thinking about. They're thinking about the teams they can be working in, the personal growth they can be experiencing. At the same time, they're saying lead by example when they talk about the subcircle. So they're asking for leadership, but in the same breath, they're saying collaborative governance, constructive discussion, fast, effective, positive change. This is not a common idea of leadership. It's very much the unleadership concepts. To that point, I think we could maybe discuss how leadership in this context is kind of a two-edged sword, and how if we get our purpose right, we're kind of setting up our leader as that sort of invisible purpose. It's leading with like an invisible hand, kind of. Any thoughts on that?
Okay, maybe I could jump in here. Out of the million slides that I created, I want to show you one. Can I do that?
Yep. Shoot, I have to give you.
But things that I got from here is manifold. We want to support Nadia because if you're successful, then everyone is successful. We want to keep track of the development and see the progress. We want a way to get the improvement proposals formed and done. We want to keep it small when it happens, so the communication is very fluent. And then we want everyone's voice to be heard. And everyone is a lot of people, so we probably need surveys and stuff. We need a mandate to make the decisions and actually do the work. It has to be agile. There shouldn't be any added bureaucracy. Maybe we should form teams only when it's needed, not just create structures. It has to be positive, effective, and fast. And it has to foster this culture of connection, relationships, friendships, and meaning. So quite a lot, a lot of demands. But hey, I'm prepared. Where is that? Maybe that one. No. Can you see terminology from strategy to execution?
Yeah.
Okay. Right. So there's a whole strategy, like collaborative strategy making process that I've been working on, but I just want to focus on this one slide now, because this probably kind of answers to all of these requirements. I try not to spend more than 3 minutes on this, but I would like everyone to understand why I've created this and what's the point. So maybe this can be a basis for further conversation. So in the world of business, there's very good tools that are applied in different ways. And when we come to Catalyst, which is basically a social movement more than a non-profit, it's a social movement more than a business. It's a innovation platform, and it's some new kind of structure that doesn't exist. So you probably cannot just take those old tools and apply them directly. So I try to adapt like this, like strategic thinking, acting, influencing kind of concepts. And I took the agile concepts and I tried to marry them together and see like what could this mean from the Catalyst perspective. So I think already a month ago, Jeremy and we identified that the purpose is probably something that we need to figure out first, because that's the basis for everything. And even now, Simon said that I still don't know what subcircle is, because no one knows. We don't know what it is because we haven't created it. We will know when we have created it. So first, the purpose, the dream, the values, what do we want to get out of this? Do that first. Then linking to that, what kind of culture we want to have. And then if we live the culture properly, then that is the brand that is in the heads of all of our stakeholders, including us, because we are the most important stakeholders because we're the users of the system. So then from this identity perspective boils down the strategic themes that we will hopefully choose as a community. These could be things like Africa, for example. We've been saying that we should focus on Africa, so that might be one of the themes. Another one might be this agility or whatever. So once those are decided, then we can come up with strategic objectives, which are very concrete objectives that are measurable. It can take about 1 to 3 years to actually reach those, but at least it forms a bit of a roadmap that you look from the strategic terms perspective and from the perspective of those core categories that George has been working on. So these core categories I've called epics here because that's the agile terminology, that these are the large bodies of work where work can be organized to, and they can be someone who is responsible for this area of work. And now we start coming for this leadership part. So everything else beforehand is collaboratively made, facilitated, coordinated, whatever, and then there's some sort of outcome. So for that strategy process, there is 2 points. One is that the process itself is very important, because if people are part of it, then they feel committed for years to come. And the other part is the end result, which is not so important as the process. But once the end result is there, it's hopefully so good that it takes us a few years ahead and we can commit to something common and we can go without friction towards the same direction. Okay, so that's the strategy part. That's the first 3 blocks here. Then the epics, initiatives, PBIs, or user stories. This is the more practical, hands-on, everyday doing stuff. So sponsors are people who are leaders of this epic. So these epics can be, well, I can come back to that later, what these core categories are. But each core category or epic, they have a sponsor. Then there's initiatives that make these epics happen. And these are implementable initiatives that break down these objectives into actionable plans. And then each of these initiatives is coordinated by a champion. So out of all the CAs, we could pick one champion who takes one initiative and sees it to fruition, no matter how long it takes. And then when we come to the weekly work, we have these project backlog items, PBIs, or we have user stories, same thing, which outline the desired outcomes from the perspective of an end user. And the end user role can be, for example, a community advisor, or a voter, or a proposer, or whatever, whichever stakeholder there is. So these could then be those improvement proposals that we have been talking about. And they could be so small that they can be initiated every week, and it takes maximum of 3 weeks to get one done. So then we can start getting rid of those things in the iterative Dropbox. So instead of calling it iterative Dropbox, we would be calling it backlog, and we could see that, okay, this is our progress. We have done these things, and this is what's yet to be done. This is the priority order. These are the people responsible for those. They are being refined, they're being planned, and they're being implemented in this order. So what do you think?
You're thinking of this as a method to that each of these forming groups would use, a strategic method by which they could not only move individual small projects, but such that the broader sensing could start to move things into a sense of ownership within these different epics, which that would then move things into smaller projects, which then would have this champion who would strategically bring it to fruition, and that everything could come through this funnel as we start to sense and identify.
Yeah, the added value of this is that people will have the mandate because it's part of the overall strategy.
Yes.
It's
Okay.
not some random shit that people do in the corner of Project Catalyst,
Yeah.
but it's the most important thing for Project Catalyst, what they do whenever they do it.
Great. Other comments here? Just jump in.
Yeah, I love the approach. I think it's not nice approach, and I would like to, let's say we choose to do this. We should then first define purpose, dream, and values, right?
Yes, that's the starting
And
point.
this is the first. Like, I don't want to always be someone who points at the issues, right? But my idea is that, sure, this is the most important thing, right? We have to define purpose, dream, and values correctly, because that's everything below that has to be in support of that purpose, dream, and values, right? So how do we create purpose, dream, and values, and how do we create legitimacy on whatever we create, right? 5 of us here does something, 10 of us does something, 100 of us does something, right? And
that's the next 20 slides.
yeah, that's the thing. And I would love to, because if we have a solution for that, solution is a is a difficult, maybe a strong term, but if we can do that and reach consensus, I'm not saying on how do we get there, I'm saying how do we all agree, and how do we have a legitimate consensus between the wider community that that is really the purpose? How do we avoid someone coming in a 2 weeks, 3 weeks, or a group of people saying, hey, that's not my purpose. Who are you to decide what my purpose is? Right? How do we come to that? That's my operational obstacle that I always see in everything that we do.
Well, for sure, that's a discovery process. I mean, that's one thing that indicates right up front. It will change. Somebody's going to come in from the fringes, and they're going to say, "Hey, this purpose didn't include me, but here's all the ways that I care about this." And so you change that purpose until they're in there. So I'm looking at Tommy's second slide here, this golden circle, and I'm drawn straight to that values and culture. And he mentioned it before, and there's kind of a layer in between the strategic layer and the purpose layer. And I'd call it, like personally, I'd call it principles. These would be the actions, the behavior that people engage in. And I wonder if we can't come at this sideways and say, okay, so maybe like, you know, purpose, it's gonna be kind of general statement, but principles are going to be a lot more specific. And sometimes it's easier to think of the specific thing and from that distill what it has in common. And Philip, you asked about how do we validate our consensus. I think you get validation with non-contradictory identity. So the more votes you hold where people just aren't contradicting the vote, the more you know that your principles are in alignment and that your purpose is united, that you're all still on the same purpose path. It's really shooting for trust. And if you think of trust as being, it's like you don't have to like somebody to trust them. And you don't have to, especially you don't have to agree with them to trust them. But there's something more fundamental that you do agree on. That's why you trust. Because regardless of whether you agree or disagree, you believe you're both working towards the same thing. That's how we go about validating the disagreements we have. And those disagreements are going to end up being the source of the real growth. When everybody agrees on something, when all you have is success across the board, there's not a lot of deep learning that goes on. You dig into a system when you have disagreement, when you have things coming in from the edges that don't fit what you thought you had in your model. So I come back to this this values and culture thing. And I think, well, maybe what we can define or outline, definitely not define, but if we could outline some things, suggest some things and say, this is the behavior we would expect from the leaders of CA subcircle. And when I say leaders, I'm coming from the point of view of nobody should lead all the time and everybody should lead at least once, right? It's definitely not a classic idea of leadership where somebody gets up in that position and they're stuck there. They can't get out. It's bad for them. It's bad for us. So maybe we could think of some basic principles we would want to operate on. These simple things, you know, like be kind. There's one thing that occurred to me, and I would like to see it somewhere in the final version of this, but I don't know. And it's the idea that we respect the work that came before. I think that could be like a decent principle to operate on. And in that somewhere, you know, I don't know what it is, but the purpose is in there somewhere.
Okay, maybe I can build on this because that's a really good point that you raise. And this addresses also Philip's worry. When we decide these principles or guidelines or values or whatever we want to call them, it shouldn't be something that we take from a 700-page management book or some fancy website. It shouldn't be imposed by some consultant. It should be an observation of what's already happening. So we take a look at what's going on really well. What is the fire within catalyst that we want to keep burning? And what does it consist of? And when those become our values, then it's something that's anyway happening. We just highlight it to new members that, hey, this is how we do things. Mm-hmm. And when it's innate for the people who are already in, and they have learned that this is the way things operate here, and it's mostly positive, then the new members are much more quicker to learn those qualities and start living that reality. It's an example is that in the company where I work for, they say that we're all superheroes, and it's printed in our backs when we get our hoodies, and it's there written when we get out of the elevator and we come to the office. And these people start living it. So from day one, they know that they are superheroes. They can be trusted. They will deliver. And it's amazing what effect that has.
Can I get you to actually repeat that, Tommy? I want to write that down.
Which point? So basically, the main point is that it should be something that is already happening, that we observe in the organization or in the movement, and then we just put it into words. We verbalize what it means. Some example ideas. It could be experiment and evolve. It could be show up and take the lead. It could be aim for impact, or be welcoming, or make waves together. Something that is actionable.
Yeah.
Could you go back to the previous, the one before this one slide? Yes. So could you give some examples of like strategic themes and then objectives?
Okay, sure. Yeah, so then I actually have to go forward.
Oh, okay.
So here is one strategy map, which is based on this idea. And this is adapted from things like strategy maps, balance scorecards, whatnot. So if you hear these terms somewhere else, they might mean something a little bit different because they come from the world of business, but I've tried to adapt them into this reality. So let's see what this consists of. So if we take a step back, there are some themes on the left side. There's some epics on the top, and there's some objectives in the middle. And all this is taking us towards the dream 2025 or whatever year we set. And in the bottom, we have the foundation, we have the values, and we have the purpose that everything is built on. Oh, and these lines between them are like connections. Like if there's some objective that reinforces another, then there's a connection between. So some examples of themes could be, like I mentioned, Africa or agility or decentralized capacity or Web3 together. you can be funky with these if you want, and they should be something memorable. Sometimes it's enough to have a word, but normally you need to have a small statement, but it should be something memorable that if you wake up a Catalyst member in the middle of the night, they will remember what they are. So these themes are something that should show in everything we do, but it kind of gives focus to these epics that we are talking about. Now, I don't know what to do. I got this thing here. Someone wrote in the chat. Okay. Now I can see again. So these epics or core categories, if they are ecosystem and processes, people and leadership, products and services, outreach and publicity. And bear in mind that it kind of matters in which order those come from. So ecosystems and processes are at the bottom of things, then people and leadership are utilizing those ecosystems and processes, and they're creating products and services. And finally, we are reaching out, and in a company, you would be selling these out to the market, but we are putting these things out there, and we are maximizing our impact by gaining more members and whatnot. So that's the outreach and publicity in the end. These are negotiable. I don't know if they are final, but it's a good guess. And all these themes and objectives here, they are all examples. There's nothing is set in stone. Does this answer your question?
On the left side, was that the what do you call the left-hand things? Agility, Africa.
Those are the themes.
And on each column is what, like a cat, or what do you call those?
Well, I call them epics, but they can be called core categories also.
Okay, and each box is what?
Objective.
Objective. Okay.
So strategic objective can be measured. So if you, maybe I have some example here. Here. So let's say we had this Ubuntu culture here, for example. So then we take a look at, okay, what does Ubuntu culture mean? So I am because you are because we are. Our amazing membership experience unites us in diversity, and this shows in our brand, making Catalyst a coveted community to join. And then there's measures. How do we know that this is happening? So we set targets for those. We want 95%, we want 6, we want 50, 20, and 5. And then we can track if we are on the track of actually reaching these or if we have already gone past. If we have reached something but not something else, then we know that here we need an initiative to focus on this. Time before leadership here it's just an example measure, which would mean that I think someone, was it Ilya or someone was asking in the Telegram that how long did it take for you to actually do something or join something or take up some responsibility. So we could actually measure that on a member level, and then we could come arrive at the number. So when you have the statement, you have the targets, then you need some initiatives to actually make it happen. So then these would be led by champions. So there would be buddy system and member community and peer mentoring and world village initiatives that all contribute to this one object.
Oh, I see. Okay, so the objective is to create this Ubuntu culture, and you measure it in this way, and then you have just various initiatives that seek to like fulfill the target, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. And but then epics, what was that again?
So those are like the perspectives into the strategy. So ecosystems and processes is one.
Oh, is it like a perspective? Okay, that's a bit different from what I think programmers use epics, but someone else.
Yeah, but okay, but if you think of epics in software development, it's a large body of work that is brought together to create a system. But we're not really creating a software system here, so it has to be kind of adopted here into a new use.
Okay. I think that was a bit confusing, but okay, but that I think I understand now the
but
general
we could call them perspectives or core perspectives or core categories or whatever. We can rename all of those. Just
what's the value? What's the added value of having those?
The added value of having those is to consider everything and not go astray, because if you don't have any perspectives, then you just blurt out some sort of things that I think we need this and that and that. Mm-hmm. But here, when you have considered, and this is not coming from me, this is coming from George, and he's been working on this for months. Mm-hmm. so I took what he has planned and I adapted that into this model. And I've been using this model in Sri Lanka, for example, when I was doing strategic consulting, and it was fairly similar perspectives or epics or core categories, but there was like 7 of them. So I think it's better to have less. Yeah. Okay, but if you read it as an Excel sheet, like column by column, then you see that, for example, in outreach and publicity, all of these things have to do with outreach and publicity, but you just look at those from the different perspectives of strategic teams, right? Yeah. So that way you can make sure that you consider what all the organization should have, which is on the top, and you consider what your strategic choice is.
I see. Okay. Yeah, I do think if you call it like funding categories, as George calls it, then I think it becomes more concrete. What we're thinking about.
Funding categories.
But it's still a bit because within the, let's say within Africa, you might want to have some hubs. You want to have people. We want to have Ubuntu culture and frugal innovation. Whereas the way George sets up these funding categories is such that people can, so that they know where to submit a proposal. Whereas in this framework, I guess you would submit a proposal, or actually, let's not go into that. Nadia and Philip has raised hands, so
that's another discussion. This has nothing to do with proposals as such.
Go ahead, Philip.
Yeah, so I would suggest to start doing, let's say, the something simple now, while we are trying to explain the whole, system that I still struggle to understand. But if we start working today, right now, somehow, on purpose, dream, and values, right?
Mm.
Somehow, right? Whether it's a draft document where we just write random things and then we iterate and we get something, right? That's just my operational kind of mindset right now, because honestly, I've been in a lot of these kinds of conversations and attempts, and it always says, I have this idea, I have that idea, I have this system that's here and there, and it's a lot of strategic things, but it always kind of either dissipates, disappears. If we don't have something that is written down that we can follow up concretely day after day, week after week, that's the initial traction that I would like to, kind of
Yeah,
have.
it's really good that you bring that up, because at the same time as we start from the top, from the identity, right? At the same time, we can start from the bottom. So we can take something that has been suggested already, and we can start experimenting. Like, how does this work? Okay, if user stories or project backlog items are something that are started every week and finished within 3 weeks, what would that mean? What does it mean for something that has been conversed in the Telegram group or in Discord? So put something into practice, start testing that out, and it already brings some results. And then you can see, okay, that's how that part of the process works. So we don't need to wait for the identity and the themes and objectives and all these things to be ready. We can start today.
And it's really important that we do start, because like you say, user stories can validate your choices and identity, your guesses in some cases, and identity can validate those user stories. So it's that sort of that non-contradictory aspect of it. As long as they're validating each other, you're on the right track, and you don't need the structure in a network like this, but it helps. And it helps when you get user stories that are invalidated by your purpose. That tells you there's something you need to work on. And when you get a principle that isn't in alignment with all of the user stories that are coming up, well, that means you need to work on that principle. To what Philip was just saying, I have a suggestion. I'm working on the intentions document. It is meant to be a nascent version of a charter that eventually could become a nascent version, or more, you could expand around a charter to have a governance framework that allows you to absorb the future, which could include reputation and DIDs and all sorts of interesting things. And it would be awesome if the CA community was really leading that. But to come back to the suggestion, I'll be working on this intentions document. What I can do is I can take from this conversation, and if we want to speak to specific principles we would like to see, that would be good. But I can take from this conversation and just put a bunch of principles in there, and we can start getting commentary on it. The communications group will widen us out to 10 or more members that are looking specifically at these issues. And that could be a good opportunity to get even more feedback on it, maybe even run the survey again and see what we get. And then we would actually be talking about something specific in terms of the principles. We'd be saying, yeah, this one sounds right. That one's too specific. This one's maybe too general, or it doesn't mean anything. So I can take the lead on that. I can get a bunch of stuff into the intentions document, and everybody can comment on that specifically.
Cool. So just one question, Nadia, please. So the intentions document theoretically will grow into a charter that will, is that the goal, to kind of become the, let's say, constitution of what we want to drive?
So,
I mean,
well,
is that the goal?
I have like seven clarifying questions I want to ask myself too. So, So maybe if I could ask some of those first, and maybe we can come to that agreement together, I think because I don't think that's a question just for me. I think it's a question for all of us. And I think it's important that we all answer that together. One of the things, when you brought this up, Philip, about what happens if an outlying person or group comes in and says, trash this idea, I don't like it, I'm doing it this way, and here's my issues, which is actually great for the environment. I think if we're, what is the ultimate goal of what we want to accomplish? Is we want to move things forward and make things better, and do that in a way that represents us. So, and that, a way that represents us is also part of this purpose and dream envisioning. But I guess my question for this group is, my first clarifying question is, Tommy, to your point of this, what you have outlined here is very intentional. So we look at what we intentionally want to create. That 2025 number is fantastic. It could also be 2023, right? So it's very scalable, like we talked about earlier. So that's like the top down kind of a thing, but the bottom up seems to me these unexpected situations that are going to pop up. Like we realize that we need to maybe make the CA assessment guide more robust to deal with issues so that they don't repeat themselves. So we have more clarity on that. That's like a very, very micro problem, but it seems like it would fit upwards, and we could really see where that would position itself. And a group might need to come together to form that wasn't thought about in the beginning, so that some of these problems, the iterative Dropbox problems, and these sort of like situational issues that need to be solved quickly could follow this format and also inform. So it would come from both directions. But ultimately, as long as a group is able to form around it, it gets communicated so that the whole community can hear it, and we draw different voices into it. It seems like it would be good if people created other models and worked in them in other ways that didn't necessarily align with it, and multiple of those could. Do you see that being an option? Do we all as a community have to adopt this, or could this be one way? And if someone comes up with an issue, they could go into this process, or if someone developed a totally different way of dealing with it that also fed it into being communicated and shared broadly, is that something that we want to encourage and that we would be excited to see happen?
That's a strategy framework. It's a snapshot and interpretation of reality. It's not reality.
Mhm.
It's an image of reality from one perspective. And what I like about this model is that, like you said, it's scalable.
Mhm.
So for example, if you take those 4 themes, or if you take those 4 perspectives, you could end up having not 1, but 4 town halls every week. So when there's no longer 200 people in the town hall, but there's 2,000 or 20,000, then we need different types of systems to support that.
Yeah.
While people still feel that they are being part of the whole and they are being productive parts of the whole.
Mhm.
And if we go on without any framework, then we're screwed. We will have only like 99.999% lurkers. And as much as we love lurkers, it's not productive.
Certainly. I totally agree. So the next question is to your question, Philip, on how fast we can implement some things. Does this group see that? My interpretation of the documents that you all wrote and contributed to a month ago is that right now it is a less strategic and more reactionary thing that the subcircle is needed for. For example, like back to this example of, we have probably until March 10th to figure out the adjustments to the documentation and the onboarding stuff for the CAs, meaning March 10th it should come off the presses so that the community has time to absorb it and make adjustments. So would a group in this way, a champion for this would come forth and say, okay, I see this is an issue, it's a big deal. There's 4 or 5 other people who also think it's a big deal. We're going to come together as a subcircle with a champion, and we're going to work together on solving this. We'll bring it to the AfterTownHall. We'll create surveys, we'll create unsync meetings, we'll create whatever the tactics are that we're gonna shop this idea that we have out to solve it. Here's the data, here's the documentation, all that. Ideally, it links with and becomes a prioritized problem within our communication system. GitHub, let's not open that can of worms right now, right? So we have a communication system that allows it to be representative of everyone hearing and contributing to it. And then it comes to a close and that problem is solved using the subcircle method. And then that champion is released from being a champion until something emerges again where that person doesn't always have a role of subcircleness. That person rises into the need and then retreats back into the community and maybe forms and supports other initiatives or maybe multiple ones at the same time. Is that, and you have this like nice 1 week to 3 week period. Is that representative of what you think could happen starting now, even over the next few weeks to test this out? Do you think that that will happen simultaneously as we start to roll out the more strategic forward thinking model? What's the consensus on that?
In favor.
Yeah, so this is a good example of an initiative called CA subcircle.
Yeah.
And later on, we might have this strategy map and we have an objective called distributed decision making. Ring a bell. And then this initiative could be one of those initiatives that make that distributed decision making happen.
Okay. I'll stop because I'll just ask more questions as I have them. I think it's very clarifying, and if we can come to terms on some of this, then we can start sooner rather than let it be something that we talk about for a long time.
Simon, can you go, please?
Okay, I'll go. First reaction, well, what I've thought about now is that we're taking on something huge. It seems a bit too big picture. I think we should just like, okay, well, we have a couple of CA problems. Let's focus on that. This thing with values, I think it's great. I think we're all here because we probably watched some video by Charles Hoskinson, or maybe something else about like the scientific rigor of Cardano, the decentralization of Cardano, and then just keep it very simple, like KISS, keep it simple, stupid, as some programmers say. So that's why, you know, with this framework, I think it has a lot of great value, but I think my gut reaction is just like, okay, we have a couple of too many of these like analytical frames. So maybe like theme, and then theme, objective, and then initiative, like 3 levels only, just off the top of my head. But that's just my gut reaction to it after having, you know, I had to think about it quite some time. It should be easy to understand. And then I think, let's for now. I mean, one of the key issues is like this information overflow. As I alluded to, we have Telegram, Discord, Twitter, all of these different information sources. So just something that probably helps Nadia quite a lot, and it would improve our problem sensing, is just that we have some people who are just tasked with reporting back, like, here I'm active on Cardano Twitter, this is what people say. I'm not, for example, but I'm sure there are some. So that's one concrete thing. And then we have the thing on the improving just the CA documentation as a very specific thing. I think those are the things that, like, I at least had in mind that the subcircle will be able to, or subcircles. I like the idea of having temporary working groups. I think that's sort of what we should just really focus on right now, because we only have 10-15 days. Then there's going to be a next cohort of CAs, and we have to be better prepared for that than we are. So like, one is the problem sensing, the other one is just creating documentation. You also have the onboarding, like, I think there are ideas of a questionnaire. But yeah, these are just some unstructured thoughts that I wanted to just spell out there.
So I just quickly want to comment, because that's exactly how it's planned out. Like, normal people wouldn't have to worry about the top part of the pyramid. Like, if you are on the top of things, like if you like to look at development from like generic framework levels, then you would be a sponsor for an objective, maybe. And that might take 1 to 3 years to make it happen, right? And there might be several initiatives under that, right?
Okay. But
And
what
then-
would you, in this specific, let's only talk about Project Catalyst. What is the objective?
Yeah, okay,
Or
so-
is Project Catalyst an objective, or is community advisor an objective?
So this whole framework is for Project Catalyst. It's not only for
Okay.
subcircle, right?
Got it, got it.
So to come back to your examples that you wrote there, what did you say? Rewrite the CA guide. So that would be a perfect user story that could be finished in 3 weeks or less, right?
So that's, oh, okay. So you have a slightly different, okay. I thought
So-
user story was just like someone complaining, oh, the CA guide is bad. And then the initiative is that, you know, we have a task group that actually solves it.
Yeah, so you have this rewrite the guide would belong to an initiative called CA subcircle, and CA subcircle would belong to objective called distributed decision making.
It's scalable time-wise. It's also scalable group size-wise. It's extremely flexible and scalable what you have here. So what you have, Tommy, is a preparatory, thoughtful, proactive approach to how we're going to grow. It will work for the CA group. It will work for Catalyst. It'll work for a small group. It just has to be scaled metrics-wise. But how we are operating right now is very reactionary. And so it feels terrible. We are reacting to problems that are happening mostly. We're building stuff as we go, but the way that we're integrating the solving of problems is very reactionary because the problems are somewhat unexpected, right? It's all an experiment. So I don't mean to say that we don't have a vision together, and I don't mean to say that. I just mean for the problems that are on our plate now in the iterative Dropbox, there is not a real strategy for how to move those things to completion and how to have someone emerge who takes ownership of it, builds a team, builds consensus. All of these sort of processes as could be tried out. We could be trying these things out and developing methods for them, writing. So ultimately too, one of the things that I wanted to just throw in here is we have this $100,000. We could write, we could think of a proposal for being able, just temporarily as an experiment, being able to fund the champion rising and maybe some of the people who work on it as a group to the point that they can bring it to a point of a proposal if it should end up there, or some things won't need proposals because they'll be tiny, like we just have to change the documentation a little bit. So we should maybe think about that as well, the incentivization blah, 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 of the process, so that we get a sense of, you know, some of these things are going to be big, longer term involvement, and some of these things are going to be short term, one-off kinds of things.
Yeah, so I would like to say, if we have, and we do have, like immediate concerns that are operational that need to be solved in 10-15 days, great, we need a solution for that, right? And that's the bottom up, right, approach. So user story, rewrite the documentation, get people together, rewrite it, improve it, like we did in previous funds, right? I'm gonna stray off a little bit just to get back. Someone mentioned interpretation of reality, right? I'm straying off just to be a little bit careful, let's say. We all have interpretation of reality. I would also not guess or jump to conclusions on people's values, why they are, you know, engaged with Catalyst and all of that. What I would do is have let's say a somewhat large poll where we say to people, why are you here, right? Or what are your values and what is your reality? I don't know how to do that, but that's something. And if we can have a minimum consensus, right? If we can have 70, 80, 90% of people agreeing on one thing, then we put that thing into the highest document that says values, right? And that's, let's say, a constitution. And we create a method on how to change that document, right? So I'm drawing parallels with the constitution of a country, right? Laws can be changed some ways, local rules can be changed different ways, but constitution can only be changed, I don't know, through referendum or however, right? So we are very different. I will not jump to conclusion someone is here because they watched Charles's video, someone is here because they like category theory, someone is here because they like money, whatever, right? We are all different people, and we all have our own, you know, expectations, whatever, right? But to get to the point of what we all or most of us agree on, we need to start from something basic, and we need to put it to paper. Because I think that we will be surprised on how people think differently, right? And if we all saying, yeah, we have all the same ideas, and then we go things and then realize 3 months down the line that we didn't have the same ideas, that's a problem. Now, this is completely different from the operational level that we were just talking about. I'm just worried about this, you know, higher level, and also about the scope. Also saying we want to do this on a project catalyst level is a bit dangerous, because not only CAs are project catalysts, right? If you want to do project catalyst, then you have to include everyone. So if we keep the scope to CA issues, and if we prove that it works, then it can be upscaled to some other levels, right? But it can be a problem if we try to, you know, take over is a hard word, but like to try to impose ourselves to solve issues and not include people whose those issues concern, right? That's kind of an elitist move. If we're CAs, we have our CA subcircle, we have our CA, you know, bubble. Let's do the whole framework for CAs and prove that it works somehow, right?
Yeah, but Philip, I would think that is dangerous, because if you're in the bubble, then you don't take into account why are you a CA, because you are a CA because of the proposers, you are a CA because of the voters. You're supposed to help them, not other CAs.
Okay, but that we align that in values. We align that in values, right? And if we see that people don't have those values, then we put it out publicly and say, okay, maybe our values are wrong. We put ourselves out there to the judgment of everybody, because that's decentralized, right? If 90% of CAs say, hey, I'm here for the CA rewards, then proposers, voters, stake pool operators, whoever will say, okay, well, these guys are just there for the money, and they have to act in a way. If we all say, hey, I'm here for the benefit of it, that's my value, whatever objective we have, whatever user story initiative we have, it has to be aligned with that value. And we can call each other out on that. If you make an initiative, well, I will make an initiative that we need to pay Philip 5,000 euros every week. That's not in line with the values, right? That's not in line with the values. Values are public, proposal is public. You can call out people on it, right? But if we don't have that written down, values, directions are can be easily manipulated. Right, so, okay, on an operational level, we need to sort A, B, and C. We need a framework how to work through the iterative Dropbox. My basic, simplest proposal would be, okay, you want a problem solved, you champion it, you step up. You say, I'm going to champion it, I'm going to call people, I'm going to get a team together, we're going to work through it, we're going to move it. That's it. That's the operational plan for now, right? If I need a, that's what we do currently, right? But on a more strategic level, if we want continuity, if we want something that's really in line, we need that foundational document, video, whatever it is, but we need to be aligned on something, right? Every time we talk, we go through 30, 40 minutes of conversations talking about the same subjects because we don't have it written down. You know, if we have it written down, then it's expected of all of us that we know this document, and we don't have to talk about that. We already know, so we can move to the next level. Right? I don't know if I was clear, but you know, we need some kind of a baseline where we say, okay, I'm a CA, I'm doing this to help the CA role be more efficient. What are the values of CAs? Now we can go through and say, okay, well, they were founded by, you know, IOG because of this, but now the community is there. There's thousands of us. Everybody needs to have an opinion. We ran a huge poll. 90% of people are here for this, and this. So we hold each other accountable for what we wrote down. If we do something else than what is written down, people can be held accountable for doing that, right? Or we as a group.
Agree. Nadia, did you have other points? You said you will come back to them.
So what I'm hearing us say here, so here's some of the points. One of them is we need an functional operational response to our need for more organized problem solving and being able to communicate how those problems are being solved by those groups. When the people rise into that role, it seems like what that would maybe produce, I'm trying to envision how this would look, is that we have an after town hall, and instead of, certainly we'll make space to talk about things and let issues come up, but it also would be a little bit more structured in the sense that you might have 3 champions, subcircle champions, maybe something like that, an official role that explains what that person is doing. There's 3 subcircle champions. Right, let's do current, right? So we have a subcircle communications champion, a subcircle CA onboarding education champion, and a subcircle, let's be really granular and say, assessment guide evolution champion, right? And that's very specific. And each of those might say, here's what we did this week. Here's what's coming up. We have a meeting coming up. If you want to join it here, here's a survey. Please let us know what you think about this. These are some things that will help us as a group. You can contribute to these initiatives in a small or large way. And that would, if you want to contribute to it, it will simultaneously be here. You can come in your off time and contribute to it, GitHub, whatever. And then hopefully in 2 or 3 weeks, there is a resolution to that, or there's a sense that this is going to take us 6 weeks or 3 months for whatever the thing is that we're working on. And that person rises on and continues to report on that. And through the process of seeing that happen, Philip, then we will start to, both through our active request for response from the community and just simply seeing how that is working, start to understand and collect values that from the community and methods that are working well that could be shared with other groups, the proposals groups, the audit groups, the different groups who are also doing similar things, to say, here's what's working within this group. You guys could maybe apply these methods and customize them for the differences that you need. And then ultimately also the CA group would have some form of a constitution that would then guide, but it wouldn't be one that we made and then tried. It would be we tried and then that was made as a result of that. So this is me trying to like clarify and think about, is that capturing what we're talking about right now? Does it serve our current needs? And does it give us space so that we can grow it into what Tommy has presented with this very sort of strategic approach to both sensing problems, but also driving the forward motion of the groups in a way that is understandable collectively?
From my side, yes. Like if you just if we come together and decide all this terminology that, okay, this is what we mean by this and this and this, then we can test those out, like you said. So maybe that more granular thing that you mentioned wouldn't be a champion, but it would be an owner.
Mm-hmm.
and like that.
Right.
So then 2 months down the line, when we start talking about these more strategic things, people are like, oh, okay, we did that 2 months ago already. So it would be familiar for them.
I do think also Simone or Simon? Simone?
Simon, just say Simon.
Just say Simon. I like to get it right.
Yeah, just say Simon. I think
I'll
that's
just take it everyone. I have the same thing with Nadia. Everyone does Nadia differently. So to your point, then, if we had someone monitoring the channels, that's a very big job for this role, actually, to process all of that. And I don't know if that's really a sustainable thing, but if there's people already in those, then it would be nice to have people be able to say, do you think this is feasible? Oh, you have an issue about, like, the lottery is a good example right now. You have an issue about the lottery. Here's the GitHub prioritized problem on that. Here's where you should put or here's the person who's championing that. You should talk to that person so you can get into that conversation, rather than
Hallelujah.
than the point is
yes.
Okay, good. So that's what we're thinking about for the communications thing. I think the communications group and this group are interwoven. I think the conversation should come together and come apart, but doesn't need to overlap so much. But if that exists, then we don't have what I've heard a few times people refer to as the Groundhog Day of every week we discover the same problems, and every week we all comment on the same problems, and every week we throw our docs at each other. And that's nice if you missed it last week, but it creates a real sense of frustration.
Look, Tommy is crying out of happiness.
Well, it makes a lot of sense to me from the perspective of this role. It makes a lot of sense that we would have a rhythm and an expectation of, we're not just going to have free for all after town halls. The champion, part of the ownership of being the champion is, I'm going to prepare myself to talk about, here's the links, Nadia or rep role. Here's the links rep role. Here's the things that I would like. I'm going to talk for 3 minutes today. And then all the champions will talk for 3 minutes. And then at the end I really appreciated you guys' feedback on the agenda for this week. Agenda is such a stuffy word, but on the flow, because then we have all those things reported on. People can come in and get a dose of that or watch it later. And then we can have a discussion and make space, and people can stay as long as they want to be involved in that conversation, but don't have to spend 4 hours on the call, God forbid, that we rehash things again. Sorry, Tommy, go ahead.
I think this boils down to what Danny said in the town hall last week, that even he feels overwhelmed. And why everyone feels overwhelmed is that everyone is trying to do everything.
Mhm.
And it just doesn't work like that anymore. It's getting too big.
Yeah.
It worked in the beginning and it was fun, but it doesn't work like that anymore. So coming back to your point, I would say an initiative with a champion should be an after town hall meeting so many weeks as necessary. And when it no longer serves a purpose, should make way for other initiatives. And there can be multiple initiatives going on at the same time, not only regarding CAs, can be something for voters, something for proposals, whatever. But they would be there for a reason, and same people could attend every week, or one person could come to one meeting, attend for 15 minutes, contribute on something and leave. So that way you could choose where you want your impact to be.
So question for this group then, does it make sense that we would maybe as a beginning sort of define a very simple process for how that, like, problem comes up, champion's problem, champion grows group. Here's an idea for how you, here's a method you could use, and we give an example of a method. Someone could do it differently, and that I think would be okay, as long as it produces the results of, we've tried to share it with everyone, we've done our research, those things. And then we define our terms. So a champion means this, an owner means this. We start, and we can change them, but we start with that. So someone goes, okay, a champion, what's a champion? And then here's the doc that, like, here's the inspired doc for how we've organized this. And that we would then also be able to explain this for new people when they come in. So a new person comes in and said, hey, I noticed this, I don't understand anything, I've never been on Telegram, but I can't get my assessment to input, how do I get help with this? And then they could, it also would be a potential for onboarding and relationship building with people as they come into our little CA ecosystem. We could say, hey, welcome in. Yes, there's a way to do that. Here's how we solve our problems. Maybe that's like a Git book like George has. Here's how we solve our problems. Here's how you can communicate. Here's the Git book links. Here's current projects that are happening. And that would be maybe for the rep or someone who wants to take that role on, to make sure that's maintained as a part of the sensing of the problems. That was a long question, but do we need to define the terms and define the process and then put it up there for people to start to consider?
Yeah, I definitely agree. We should just become quite like actionable, get something down. And one structure is to start from the bottom up, user story based. So, we kind of gather inputs on what needs to be solved. I do like the idea of anyone being able to just take an initiative and being a champion. And then the way I see objectives, objective could be kind of like the top-down level approach. So either you can, you know, you hear some user story and you're like, okay, I want to have like I have an initiative now, and then you from that initiative you could, I guess, formulate an objective. So that could be, as I wrote in the chat, that could be some measure of CA's feeling that now the onboarding process is good. But as you do that, you set up this objective, someone else might also say that, well, I want to work on improving the CA guide. So what I'm imagining is that you could have two groups that are actually working on the same objective, but that might create, well, it might be a bit confusing, but I think that's the easiest way to solve the thing of like who is doing what. But I think these three levels are probably enough for the moment. Like we don't need the themes. We will get to the principles later on. But yeah, I think this is a good start for the process.
Yeah, it can be a completely different group of people who works on that more strategic framework in the same time. But yeah, actually, your comment brought up another idea, which is that the proposals that we currently have, they are kind of on that initiative level. So we have challenges which are kind of objective level, and then we have proposals which are the initiative level, and then each initiative has tasks. So the same way as we have these internal developments that need to be brought to AfterTownHall and whatnot, we can ask the proposers to come there. Okay, come there and like share, what are you struggling with, what do you need to get done, and host a room on that. And same way they could become collaborating and contributing to the same process.
But what is it called when you are a champion, but for an objective? Like
Sponsor.
Sponsor. Okay.
Sponsor.
Or
What-
maybe just to make it like more streamlined, we could call it proposer.
Can we just be like initiative taker and objective owner or something like that?
We can call them giraffes and hippopotamus if you want.
Just please
Doesn't
not
matter.
proposal. Please not proposer.
I think we should call these things words that are specific to this process and not absorb a different word because of and try not to pick things that within our ecosystem already mean something else. I think that's important because we're especially for people beginning here, there's so much to learn as far as terms and how things work that I would throw my hat in the ring for making things sort of native to this process.
So basically come up with new terms. Is that what you mean? Is that better?
Well, we are now talking about sponsors and champions and owners, and we are not using those yet, so I think they're fine.
Yeah.
Right. And because when you become a proposer in our ecosystem doesn't also have to have this role that we're creating. And so if you're a proposer somewhere else, I think we could just see how that might create confusion for people.
But I actually wanted to ask, what does a sponsor do?
I don't know. We haven't defined it yet.
But what does it mean to? Okay, but I mean, surely you had some idea.
Yeah. Okay. So the sponsor, remember, the objective is something that can be done. Okay, maybe in crypto it can be done in 2 quarters, but normally it would take like 1 to 3 years or even 5 years back in the day. So it's a longer term objective that you want to reach that takes you towards your overall strategy. And it has some measures that you can keep measuring year on year and see how they develop. And you can break them down to initiatives. So basically you then, as a sponsor, you overlook that entire development on a much longer time scale, and you overlook the initiatives that are there. You support, you take out all the roadblocks for your champions and make sure that they are successful, and you make sure that the owners under them get good leadership and all that. So that way all these roles play together towards the longer term strategy.
So just to check, would you say that perhaps Nadia could be a sponsor of the CA like the CA objective, just like there are a couple of metrics, right, that we can use
Yeah.
to measure how
Yeah,
well
yeah,
we're
that-
doing as a CA community. And then another one, what might be how the, I don't know, the proposers are doing.
Yeah,
So it could be that the subcircle representatives each are sponsors of corresponding objectives, for example.
yeah. And yeah, maybe yeah, let's not get into that discussion now because we don't know enough, but these are the questions that we need to answer together. But yeah, good point.
It is very fluid too, because I think that at least just based on some of the things that natural workload, I think like Jeremy here is sort of emerging as maybe the champion of the formation of the subcircle, that we're all contributing to it. And so we're contributors to that. And then maybe I will emerge as the champion of the getting a communications process intact, which probably only will take a week or two. And you know, each of us will emerge and release that role. And I think that really speaks to one of the key points in what you wrote, Tommy, that I really liked was it really encourages leadership. And meaning it encourages, leadership is not the right word. It encourages people to rise into a level of solving the thing that they're seeing and being flanked and supported by other community members who maybe have been through that process already, or who really understand it with an expert level. It creates a lot of community interaction and collaboration, and it also creates a way for us to bring people into positions of really taking ownership of something and guiding it to its fruition without having this long-term expectation that has a question mark at the end of it.
Nice. Yeah. I have to get going though. But
I just want to say one more thing about this
Yeah,
circle
last thing.
stuff, because it's not set in stone like what circle is, because it's still an experiment within an experiment.
Yeah.
So maybe next iteration of circle will not have these particular roles that are there now, but maybe if we adopt this kind of framework and we all like it and we say, okay, these are the perspectives that we should be looking at, then maybe each perspective has their own responsible in the circle. So there might be someone who is responsible for the ecosystem and processes, and there's one that is responsible for people and leadership, and one for product and services, and one for outreach and publicity. So that way you outline you align the roles in the organization with the strategy that you create, and you don't try to fit a strategy into some arbitrary structure.
Yeah, very good. Maybe so if anyone needs to hop off, go ahead. Maybe we add a last question here. And of course, Jeremy, if you have any other ones that were on your list here to add, mine would be how do we let's take this to the after town hall. And how do we want to add people to this group in like selectively? And I think we could be thoughtful about who will help us pick this apart. What other perspectives do we need in here? And should we do it as a survey? Should we put something together? How do we move this into a place of having the community look at it and consider it and have it start to be something that we put in motion in the next couple of weeks?
Jeremy, do you want to start with the purpose discussion?
I don't have any specific ideas on this one, but I trust you'll come up with a good solution here.
Thanks for your time.
Well, you already contributed, and I take it for myself that I will not, well, I will park this slide set and I take the bottom of the pyramid and focus on that.
Okay, cool. See you guys.
Bye, Simon.
Bye, thanks.
Thank you, Simon. Yeah, what I can speak to now is how I personally will be moving forward on the intentions document. I'm going to see if I can't get it filled out based on what people have said here, so that we're actually talking about the document, because right now it's just a template, it's a placeholder, and that can get torn apart at that point. It will primarily focus on, I doubt that I'm going to try and actually phrase the purpose. It'll be something very general. Rather, I think I'll try and pull from what we've talked about to get some basic values and principles laid out to be picked apart. And Tommy, your survey, we can't run that enough, in all honesty. I think we should run that between now and the after town hall. We certainly should run it at the town hall if we don't get it in before then, because we can just keep hearing back from it. I don't even think you need to change it, frankly. It really did a good job of pulling out people's personal interests and their group interests. There's 3 questions, pretty simple, easy to, pretty quick to get into an answer, and very quick to parse, which is useful. We don't have a whole lot of time to be breaking data down. So I see the intentions document as being very much entirely about capturing, not prescribing at all at this point, just capturing. To put the principles in is to ask, are these right? And that's finding ways to get it into the communication channels. Once it exists, once it's on a page, then people can find it, talk about it, comment on it, discuss it, all that. So I think it's pretty important to get it out there. And it's just running in the background, capturing, growing, learning. And it's really important that the people that want to start working on projects jump into those projects. And the formats you guys have laid out, I think, are a great start. I doubt I'll be too involved in any of that, but I will be listening with this intentions document in the background and seeing who else gets involved at that level as well, collaborating on that.
Okay, so you're gonna talk about purpose, about the purpose, and have hopefully like a document someone could look at and review.
Yeah, for the after town hall.
We'll encourage participation in the survey. Did that sound right to Philip, Tommy?
Are we talking about the purpose of subcircle, or are we talking about the purpose of Catalyst?
I think of it as like I'm limiting myself strictly. I would love to talk about Catalyst, but I'm strictly limiting myself to just talking about the CAs. And if we do it right, and this could take 3 funds to figure this out, but if we do it right, it'll be like a fractal. When we look at the individual actors within it, they'll be operating on a lot of the same premises. When we zoom out and we look at Catalyst at large, they'll be operating on a lot of the same premises.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure that the advisors will not come up with things like, what are our values? Greed. Yeah.
That was like straight out of Monty Python right there. How you just
Yeah.
Okay, great. And then we'll have the survey there. So those will be 2 actionable things. Where should we put this recording? I think we could have people watch this recording. That would be nice if they choose to, if they want to get involved, because we really hashed out a lot. And I think that between this and the document, the subcircle root doc, someone could get a really good leg up on understanding what we're thinking about here.
Yeah, it's like there are some people who go to Netflix and watch a full-length movie, and there's a Catalyst community advisors who watch this.
we can always put it on the Swarm YouTube if you don't have a better solution. Yeah.
Cool. So I'll take care of that. And then I guess from my role as things emerge, and I've had a lot of conversations just trying to get a sense of where everything is over this past week and a half. So maybe these 3 or 4 groups have formed already. This one for the subcircle, there's a communications one Scott is really spearheading. I think it's probably it's a broader group than the immediate solving of the pre-March 10th educational issues, which is like, how do we onboard? How do we, how do we approach that? So that educational group is a larger group, but maybe also can be focused on fixing that's a long-winded way to say that group is big, but it needs to focus on a specific thing and then come back out to focusing on the larger issue. So those 3 are there. And then it would be nice to share George's work. And I think if we just have those 3 things and leave some space for any proposers who are going to propose to the challenge teams, the challenge team will be on here as well on Wednesday. So they'll be able to field questions. That might be a good beginning, and we'll start to monitor how these champions who don't know they're champions yet really, but are doing the role, but we haven't defined it yet. We'll just monitor how that went start to finish and start to put these things into practice slowly but quickly, so that we can have some intel on how it went as we develop a broader purpose. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yes.
Where are you at, Jeremy? Anything else you want to add here?
Not anything in particular. I think we can wrap it up. I was going to point out, Philip had mentioned and Tommy had mentioned, like, if we focus on the CAs, do we get stuck in a bubble? And I believe one of the principles that will eventually emerge will be the idea of really looking to the edges of the CA community for feedback, finding some way to make sure that that communication is solid, because it's kind of like if you imagine the intertidal zone, you got ocean meets land, that space where the ocean and the land meet, that's by far the most diverse crucible of new information comes from there. Lots of diverse life forms, lots of diverse ways of living. We have the same thing where a CA is also a proposer. That's a really unique viewpoint that gives us a lot of information, especially if they're mostly proposer. And that happens all throughout the perimeter of the kind of undefinable border about who's a CA and who isn't. Obviously, you do the work, you're a CA, but as we introduce rep and things, it's going to get even tighter. You know, we're going to be able to come back and say, here's a role, like we talked about sponsors and champions. Those are roles, and a governance framework at some point will tell people explicitly, this is a role, this is its requirement. And building that out takes longer than it does to actually execute the role. So we need to execute the role, feel it out. It's all just so emergent. I think of it like driving at night. You got your headlights in front of you. You can only see about 20 yards in front of you, but you can go 300 miles doing that. And so that's kind of a space we're in as far as finding the purpose and the principles behind this. So it's very much just a learning and reacting and emergent process, I think.
That reminds me of one more perspective that should be mentioned probably, which is that it might be hard to come up with the purpose of community advisor subcircle if you don't know what a community advisor is.
Exactly.
And there's, for example, Zoe and Quasar, who've been very loud about deciding on the terminology.
Yeah.
Because if we call people community advisors, for me, it rings as a bigger responsibility as spending 2 weeks a quarter assessing proposals. So you need to be very clear on that. And I think that comes back to Nadia. Have you figured out what is the mandate of CAs and what is the role of CAs and what is expected from them? Is it 2 weeks a quarter assessing, or is it really advising the community?
Way to put her on the spot.
Well, I think it's important that this role doesn't become the decision maker of that, right? I mean, that's a big collective decision.
Well, I think we can agree that whether you call it a CA or you fire them all, that there's, you might call it quality assurance or quality control, but there's a job being done that is making the catalyst environment healthier. You can think of it like a hive of bees goes out and pollinates the fields around it. That's because it's an integral part of that. And it doesn't matter if you use bees or some other pollinator, you got to get that pollination done to get a healthy ecosystem. So what the CAs do is really what they are. And, are we pollinators? I don't even know what that means, but I think that's actually probably going to show up in that purpose just for the CAs. It should be somehow that specific, but general enough to subsume all of the ways that work.
You got cut off. Was that the end of the sentence?
Yeah, that was the end of the sentence.
Okay.
But yeah,
also think it's-
sorry,
it's-
sorry.
Go ahead.
Can I- Yeah, so just to wrap that up, so I think what is needed is that we decide on what the process is, what the roles are, and what are the steps in the process, and what those roles, what those roles, what kind of role do they play in different parts of the process. So I think this assessing and advising, these are completely different things, and we should know what we're talking about.
I agree. I guess this is one where we've had a lot of conversations about this back and forth in Telegram and probably other places in the channel over time. And certainly the word advice to the point of like when a word has a certain connotation for someone, if you have a financial advisor and now you have a community advisor, right? Words that are familiar to us from other places, that you have a certain expectation of the level of responsibility of that role. It's certainly off-putting. I do think that in a sense, the community advisor is advising the community based on having done the assessments. So that, I mean, if you wanted to really get specific about it, probably you can make a strong case for it. And then also the practice of doing the assessments could be but then you'd have to change, you can't be the community assessor. Are we going to change the whole thing altogether? What is the feasibility of doing that? Is it just something we decide on and make the change? But I think that should be an actual like official conversation that is had where we all make the case for it and we go through a process of making that decision together based on what our perceptions are.
I think this clarification of the process is one of the initiatives that should be undertaken pretty soon, and I would be quite happy to lead that if needed.
Okay. Does that mean that you're going to start putting it together, or?
I started 3 months ago.
Well, sure, but I mean,
that's our core problem. But that's our core problem.
it is. I mean,
We don't know how to. You have a champion, but you don't. From get it to an idea to the result is the problem, right? That's all of this is us trying to do that. Who has the mandate? Who has the mandate to change the name? Or to do anything to change just to change the name from community advisors to community assessors or community whatever,
And then we all get angst with each other. But if that's troublesome. So
yeah.
So if you're saying that, if you want to lead it and you feel that you have been, what is the process that should we then follow this process of subcircling, even though it's a big decision, but probably not one that needs months to decide? Is that then that we get Q and we get Zoe and we get everyone else who's commented there, we start with those people and then we say, at this time, we're going to hash this out and let's talk about it. And here's at the end of it, do we have then, as always the important question, the capacity to make this decision now? What will it take for us once we decide on it to actually make this change? And then the same champion has to bring that to the end. And I don't think that is the role of the rep, unless the rep is decided to champion things. I don't think that is the role of the rep for all these different.
I agree with you. I don't think that's your role. That was not my point.
And I don't think it should become that role because that's
no, it should not. I agree.
It's not a good precedent.
I agree. It's just that we have to find a way to get to that point, right? My idea, what I would love to see is have someone yell in the beginning, whoever, Tommy, Quasar, Zoe, Philip, Nadia, Jeremy, whoever. Hey, I want this because I think it's wrong. Great. Then you have to have some consensus. You have to have at least some small group of people that like your idea and that pushes it forward and go, continue.
And very importantly, also people who totally disagree with you. I mean,
yes, but then in the end, it has to be some kind of a wide consensus, whether it's a vote on chain or something. And it just cannot be in the end crying to Danny, hey Danny, change it, because then it defeats the whole purpose of it, right?
Totally agree.
And I can just go and cry to Danny immediately, right? We have to find a way how, without IOG, without someone who is the boss.
Philip, we have been talking about this for the past 1.5 hours. So if this objective initiative user story model is something that we could take into practice now. What it would mean from Nadia's perspective is that Nadia is a sponsor for the objective, which is called community advisor process or whatever. And then we have initiatives. One is led by Jeremy as a champion, CA subcircle. One is led by Tommy, which is called process clarification and process and role clarification. Another initiative. And then something could be led by you and something could be led by Simon, whatnot.
Yeah.
So then Nadia has a working tool set of, okay, this and that initiative is going forward. They are working independently, but they also have to have like weekly meetups with each other so that they are synced. And when things start to materialize, okay, this bit is ready, this bit is ready, this bit is ready. And what does the definition of ready mean? One part of the definition of ready might be that the community has been heard. So we have sent out the survey and we have processed the results and we have communicated that after town hall and whatnot. So after that, Nadia can say, okay, this initiative is ready, this is ready, this is ready. Okay, my objective is ready. I'll take it to the circle and the circle can say, okay, this is great, let's do it.
But in that case, circle is a decision-making body.
I think circle is the listening body if the decision can be made by the community. And
So-
if
Okay, that's
not-
fair enough. Yeah,
Yeah,
my comment was wrong. Yeah, it's not
so-
decision-making if we all made a, yeah, okay.
the way I see this whole thing is that things are ebbing and flowing between IOG and the community, and Circle is in between making that happen. And I want that to be a two-way street, that if something comes from IOG, for example, the D reps or something like that, that sounds like an initiative belonging to an objective, and they just need to tell us what the objective is. And they can bring those things from top down and say that, okay, let's do this thing. And if people like that thing, then we will do that thing. But we can also propose things and start doing things. And if they fit in the same model, then we have common terminology. We don't need to be at odds with each other, but we can actually pull towards the same direction.
There should be, I agree, there should be a certain criteria that a champion has to meet. Did you meet in a small group? Were there dissenting opinions? Did you do a survey to the community? Or how did you survey the community? How did you gain community perspective? Have you shopped this out? Blah, blah, blah. What are the implications? Things like that. Sort of like a proposal. You're proposing a solution to a problem. So there's some criteria. And then the listening body of the circle goes to IOG, and rather than being like, what can we do and why can't we? We can say, here's the problem that we have. Here's what we're thinking about doing about it. Here's all the work that we've done around it. And then let's move this thing forward. And that's a lot different. That's a lot different of a conversation. It's a lot different of a conversation. And it's not to say that that hasn't happened. It's not to say there aren't difficulties and it's all the growing pains and everything. I think we'll have a lot more success if we really think this out and bring everything together and do our work of moving forward what we can and ask for the collaboration where it's available. It's going to be a much more representative approach of what this group is capable of. This group is capable of so much, and we just have to tie the ends together a little bit.
Once we have started this and we have started moving and we have the process kind of fixed and things are falling in place, maybe you can take this as a process to Circle and say, hey, so we are doing this, would you like to do the same? And then if all the Circle representatives in their own right are doing the same kind of approach, then we've taken a huge leap forward.
Huge leap forward.
Huge.
And I would like to just personally express to this group, reading these documents was so inspiring, and it just provided so much clarity. And I think that we're really, there's a lot to do in it long term. It is a long-term scale project, and a lot will be evolved that is not so tactically operationally focused as we're talking about right now. But what a great position to start in to be able to address some of this stuff. And I really appreciate being able to work on it with all you guys.
And what I'm so happy about is that when that political election started and we were supposed to give speeches and whatnot, and everyone was saying that it doesn't matter who gets elected because we anyways are going to work together. And it's
Right.
happening.
It's happening.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we had a
hold us,
culture.
and they can hold us accountable because we said it publicly, and here we are now. And that's
and
important.
and that's
right?
why we are recording this.
That's why we're recording it, right? That's
Ah,
it's
finger wag, good.
yeah.
Well, this is longer than a half an hour.
Yeah, a little bit.
True Catalyst style. Cool. But okay, so I'm gonna come away from this. I'm gonna put this recording on Swarm. Jeremy, you'll get to me about what you're gonna talk about and any links and things we need to add for after town hall. Tommy,
Okay.
you're gonna let me know how you want to approach this clarification of the process championship you just took on. Or just that conversation, we can all work on it together. It doesn't have to be, or we can also, like, Zoe or Quasar could lead it too. I mean, that's totally, or anyone who wants to lead it can lead it.
That's actually a good point, because Zoe was already like working with me in that document, but we had no mandate to do anything with it, so it just died.
Well, and Zoe's a great facilitator. So that would be a great way to
And I would like to say this off the record, but since you're still recording, I have better things to do. So if other people step in.
well, it is something, it's a perfect example of something that there's a lot of passion around, where someone could rise into it and leave out of it and make a big impact in a short time. Right. So, and then, so I'll put that together, and then we'll have this to present, and we'll start to move it forward, and we'll naturally, so I'll chronicle, and maybe I'll make like an idea for a checklist, if that is okay with everyone, for things that we should start to monitor, since we have an experiment going that doesn't have a lot of criteria to it yet. Maybe they'll just
Right.
be like a little checkbox kind of thing. Feel good?
Yep.
Jeremy,
Yeah, that sounds good to me.
I high five you all from afar.
That was great, everybody. Thank you.
All right, thanks, guys. Really great.
Thank you for the time.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Oh, I need permission back from you to.
Can I end meeting for all?
Yeah, I think you can. I think it'll still do my report, right? Okay.
Wait,
Maybe give it back to me so I can just officially end the recording.
how?
I think you right click my little dots there, and then you give me the,
Your little what?
in the top right corner of my frame there, it has the 3 little dots. Go to my picture and find my
Make
dots,
host.
and make host, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, perfect. Okay, good. Thanks.